Hi, thank you for joining us today. This is the Preparing for the Multiplication Tables check with Twinkl's apps and resources. We've got a few things to show you today, including our exciting new app. So I'm very excited to share that with you. So first of all, my name's Sally, and I'm joined on the call with Becky today. First of all, we're going to look at what is the MTC, so the Multiplication Tables check. Why is it important for children to have recall of times table facts? And then I've broken down a little checklist of things that you might want to think about when you're preparing for the MTC. Becky's going to take you through a tour of Twinkl resources. So she's got some amazing resources that she looks after on site. And then I'm going to introduce you to our new app. And then we're going to talk a little bit about access arrangements. And then if we've got time, and I'm sure we will, we're trying to not take up too much of your time this evening. We'll have time for a Q&A. So what is the MTC? So the MTC is the sort of short name for the Multiplication Tables check, which is the statutory times table assessment, which all Year 4 pupils need to do in England. So that's children that go to state-funded maintained schools, special schools or academies, including free schools. The test takes place on a computer. So that can be on a laptop or a tablet, or a desktop computer. Children enter their answers using an on-screen keypad or a computer keypad, and one question will appear on a screen at a time. So if you've done the Year 4 times table check before, it's the same this year. There's no changes to it, or none that have been announced so far. So let's fingers crossed that we've got up-to-date information. In 2025, the check must be administered between the 2nd of June and the 13th of June. So that's the same as last year. It's those first 2 weeks of June. And children need to answer 25 questions. They have 6 seconds to answer each question and 3 seconds between each question. The test ordinarily will take no longer than 5 minutes. I say ordinarily because there are some SEN features such as pausing that can make it last a little bit longer, but we'll come to that in a moment. And schools will have access to the try it out check ahead of time. The date for that is to be confirmed at the moment. So as I said, access arrangements can be made by teachers to support pupils with specific needs. And there are various arrangements that you can make, including changing the font size, adding a longer pause, and changing the background colour. You can also add audio cues. I would recommend, if you're doing that the child sits in a separate room or has headphones, because that could be really off-putting for other children. And the statutory guidance states that schools do not need to request permission from the testing authority to use access arrangements. So as long as you put the access arrangement on there and put the reason why you're giving it, you don't need to ask permission, but you do need to log it. And that's the same if you have children that are not going to take part in the check. So children who are not going to take part in the check are those children that are not accessing times tables. They cannot access the 2, 5s and 10 times table facts. They're working at a level which isn't at that requirement yet. So they may not have any conceptual understanding of what multiplication is. Students also who have English as an additional language, who have arrived in school during that check window, and you just haven't had chance to sort of, you're bring them in school, trying to make them welcome, and you're just not sure where they are with their times tables, you also do not need to put those through the assessment check. There is no official pass mark for the MTC. You will be told the percentage of pupils that have got full marks, but you do need to share the mark that the children in your class get with their parents. And yeah, like I said before, the access to the preparing for the check, the website where you can go in and do a test run of the MTC, we haven't been told when that portal is going to be open this year. Last year opened on the 8th of April, so, and that was pretty much in line with what it was the year before. So we're assuming that it will be in that April period that it will open up. And that's when you'll be able to generate pins, but we'll come to that a little bit later in the presentation. Yep, so you've got the first 2 weeks of June to administer the check. Last year you were given an extra week if something went terribly wrong, like you had awful, you know, the internet for the whole school was wiped out, or so, you know, your school had to close for whatever reason. So you've got that extra week, but that is in extreme circumstances, I would say, and I wouldn't rely on the extra week. So yeah, try and get it done in those first two weeks. And yeah, that hasn't been confirmed yet, but we will let you, yeah, we'll update our guidance on that once the 2025 dates have been released. So I'm just going to hand over to Becky now.
Thank you, Sally. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so as Sally said, this is from the original guidance for the MTC. It hasn't changed in all the years it's been happening so far, so we don't envisage that it will. But this is quite interesting to look at because it's the weightings table. So I think when you first think of a times table test, you might think it's just random facts. The first thing to really be aware of is that it's just assessing multiplication facts, although we do put a lot of emphasis, don't we, when we're teaching on the corresponding division facts as well. It is just the multiplication facts themselves that are being tested in the test, and it isn't random. So it could be a range from up to the 2 times table, from the 2 times table to the 12 times table. But as you can see from the table there, the first column is the minimum number of items for each form. So you can see the 2s, 5s and 10s may not, sorry, 2s and 10s may not appear at all, and you might only get 1, 3, 4 or 5 times table fact in there. But that the maximum for 2s, 5s and 10s is 2, and you're much more likely to have the facts from the 6, 7s, 8s, 9s and 12s. So they do have a higher weighting in the test, although there is obviously an element of randomization. It is based on that algorithm. So those are the ones that, I mean, those are the ones that they are learning in year 4 anyway, but those are definitely the ones that have the higher weighting in the test. Just important to be aware of that. Just another interesting infographic really to say that, to remind us that although a times table square can be quite daunting, there's a lot of facts there in that square, that actually children only need to learn just over half of those facts, because hopefully by this point they will have an understanding of commutativity. So they will know that you can do a multiplication calculation in any order and the answer, the product will be the same. So yes, it's important that is taught, and it is taught from earlier in the school time as well, from Key Stage 1. So they will hopefully already have that understanding. But sometimes showing children a times tables square and saying these are the facts you need to learn can be quite daunting. So it is worthwhile maybe thinking about having a half square with the facts that need to be learned. Maybe that commutative nature can be put on there somewhere. And of course, then there's also the option to look at patterns. So, you know, if you know your 5s, you can quite easily work out your 10s. If you know your 2s, you can double them to make your 4s. It's about spotting those patterns and making sure that children are aware that it's not just learning all of those facts as separate information, and that actually having some of that mathematical understanding can lower the load a little bit. This is probably a good time to mention that rote memorization is not the only thing that we're suggesting we do for times tables. It's not the same as teaching for understanding, and won't suit everybody in your setting. So we know how important it is, particularly all up-to-date pedagogy as far as maths mastery goes. We know it's important that we're teaching children for understanding. And when you are working on children's speed recall of tables, you have to make an assumption that their understanding has been taught before. So children will have learnt these things in years 2, 3 and 4, and there will hopefully have been a lot of use of manipulatives, some use of arrays, lots of models and images to teach what understanding is. Of course, if that isn't in place and you know that you've got some children that do have a bit of conceptual misunderstanding there, that does need to be addressed. And just learning tables by rote is not going to work instead of teaching for understanding. So it's really important to teach that understanding. But bearing that in mind, it's also key for children to be able to recall these facts at speed. And the next slide will actually show us why in a little bit more detail. So if you have recall and those facts are stored in your head and you've learned them to, and the buzzword, isn't it, is automaticity, then you'll be able to just use them. You are not using any of your working memory to recall those facts, and therefore you are much, much more likely to be able to use that working memory to do the more complex maths or the more complex calculations or reasoning or whatever it is you need to be able to do. So there's a really interesting report, and this is just a snippet of it, but it is definitely worth a read, from the Education Endowment Foundation about cognitive science and how much of the working memory needs to be used for certain things. And the quote that I've taken from it is that focus on managing cognitive load is not to minimize the cognitive load, but to optimize it. So you're minimizing the unnecessary load, and ensuring that working memory remains focused on information that's being taught. It's just about freeing up that working memory. We know that further along their school journey in Key Stage 2 and further into Key Stage 3 and 4, these times tables facts are going to be used time and time and time again. If children can just recall them, they're going to find the more complex application of those facts much, much easier to manage and uses much less working memory. Thank you, Sally. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Becky. So I've put a little checklist together for what I've done in previous years. I've taught in Year 4 for quite a few years, and what I've done to prepare myself and prepare the children for the MTC. So first of all, I would make sure that we're teaching that conceptual understanding, and as Becky's just touched on, like why that's so important. But yeah, really understanding multiplication. And we'll look at that a little bit further. Then informing parents, practicing the times tables, really important. We're going to talk a lot more about that. Consider who and how, and what I mean by that is sort of your access arrangements and your interventions. Prepping your equipment and your environment, really important. Might seem a bit obvious, but just going to point out a few things that you might need to consider there. Informing other staff, generating pins, and practicing the tests. So I'm going to take them one by one. So teaching for conceptual understanding. What we mean by that is in Year 2, children are going to start looking at multiplication. They're going to start reflecting on repeated addition, understanding that 3 groups of 5 is the same as 5 plus 5 plus 5 is the same as 3 times 5. And so they really need to have that solid understanding of what multiplication is before they can even start to begin to understand those times tables by rote. There's no point children learning times tables if they don't know how to apply them or what they are. So that conceptual understanding of what multiplication is underpins it all. And then we've got the commutative property, which again they will be looking at in Key Stage 1. So they will start to look at it in terms of addition. First of all, they know that 3 plus 5 is 8. But 5 plus 3 is also 8, and they can see that, and that's a concept that they will be really quite confident with before they then start looking at that in terms of multiplication, that 2 times 4 is 8, 4 times 2 is 8. So they could know that 2 times 4 is equal to 4 times 2. And as Becky pointed out before, once they've grasped that commutativity, then they only need to learn half of those times tables. It sort of quickly cuts down the amount of facts that you actually need to learn. And that's really great because they've learned their 2s, 5s and 10s, and suddenly they don't need to learn, when they're learning their 3s, they don't need to learn 3 times 2 or 3 times 5 or 3 times 10 because they've already got those facts in the bank. So it's a really nice point to give to children so that it makes it less scary. They don't always have to learn 12 new facts, that they're building on their knowledge all the time. Another property of multiplication that's really important is the distributive property. Now, I was saying to Becky earlier, I'm still not great at my 12 times table. I mean, I can answer my 12 times table within 6 seconds. Yeah, I can do it. But do I know the fact off straight away? No, I add 10 times the multiple and then I add 2 times. you know, and I can do that so quickly that I can generate that within 6 seconds, and that's fine. But that's because I understand the distributive property. So giving the children those tools to be able to work out facts, it's great for the 7 times table, it's great for the 12 times table. So if they are struggling to remember that one fact just straight away, they've got the tools there to use. And then the associative property, I would say, is probably not so important for actually answering the MTC, but it's another important concept that they will learn in year 4 when it comes to multiplication. Right, so the next thing on my checklist was to inform parents. Now, I used to do this right at the beginning of the year. I would I've worked at a couple of different schools. At one school, we would do like a meet the teacher parents evening style thing, and would do a presentation. It worked really well because we went on a residential in year 4. So all the parents came to listen about the residential, and I brought in the times table checker at that point as well. You could also do that if you're doing a class celebration and you've got parents coming in. You know, it's worth just bringing it in, that mention of that in whatever opportunity you've got, because you want children to be practicing their times tables at home as well. You might find that a letter home is a really useful way to do that. We've got a letter template on the website which you can just copy and paste and put on your letterhead. We also have on the website this information booklet, which is from the DFE, so that you can print and send that to parents, or you can email it to them if that's easier for you in your setting. And then there's some other sort of ideas I've put on here, just putting a note in your reading journal. If you use Google Classroom, you might want to put your letter on the Google Classroom. You might want to hold an online information session like this. If you do, you could record it and then stick that on your Google Classroom or in your newsletter, if that's works well for your setting. You know your setting, you know how best to communicate with parents. So there's just a few other ideas. And then if you've got a homework journal or sheet, you can also add things on that. I know sometimes it's worked really well if you're practicing a particular times table in class and you've got a weekly spelling list. You can put that time, say, oh, we're doing these spellings this week and we're looking at this times table, so you can add it in on that sheet at the same time. So we're back over to Becky.
Thanks, Sally. So I'm going to share with you a selection of resources we have available to help with practicing times tables. I'll just reiterate again that we're talking now about practicing those facts rather than practicing or teaching for understanding. One of my favourite things in the Ofsted subject report, and it's quite a long report, but there's lots of lovely things in there that really hold up what teachers have known for quite some time. They recognise that songs, games and rhymes are a really good way to practice. They actually said practice doesn't always involve textbooks and worksheets. It can include songs, games and rhymes, which is fantastic, because I think if you ask a lot of children what they think maths is, they think about things like textbooks and worksheets. If you ask the mathematicians, they would say it's about patterns and finding relationships and things. So I think that's really important. And the Ofsted report just backs us up, really, that songs and rhymes are the perfect opportunity for low stakes practice. Children aren't so worried about it. It's not just for times tables, but you can use it for other things. But also it helps them to remember more, which is what you're looking for. And I know that you're not always going to get a whole class of children, all of whom love to sing their times tables, but you will have some. And I think that's why it's important to make sure you're giving a huge range of types of activities to practice times tables. And our times table songs, that's just a selection there. We do have one for each of the times tables. Roctopus, the octopus in the middle is my favorite there. But that's just, we do have a song and a related game for each of those characters as well. As I just mentioned, practicing times tables should be completely varied. You've got children are very varied, aren't they? How they learn, how they engage is very different. So as many different ways as you can have to practice times tables, the better. It's one of the easiest ones to just slot in because you're practicing, not teaching. It can be put in for us 5 minutes. If you do your 5-minute mile or something like that, you can chart tables while you're doing that. If you've got a ball-related warm-up in PE, you can do times tables facts in that. And I think, this is just a selection of some of the resources you might use. We do have concept videos on site for each of the times tables that talk a little bit about the relationships between the tables and things you might do to practice them. just some short 5-minute videos. We've also got a huge range of games, some things that might have something you might want to print out, like a game board, some things like the one on the left there, which is about ball games you might play with times tables. And as I said, if you can weave it into your warm-up in PE, then that ticks 2 boxes at the same time. But also we've got a huge host of games, and you could find many games, you can make some up, that use things that you just have to your disposal all the time. Some dice, a pack of cards, some digit cards. I know that when my children who've both been through the times tables check now, were doing it, we had post-its of the ones they just couldn't remember, and they were just stuck in really obvious places, mainly the fridge, so they could see them all the time. So it's just about making sure that that practice is constant and varied, so that you're trying to appeal to as many children as possible. We do have a fairly new MTC hub on the Twinkl website. The link is on the slides there, and it breaks everything down into our paper resources, as well as the guidance and some digital resources as well, which you'll hear a bit more about later. So you'll want to know how you're going. You know, we are now in October. You've got a few months now before we have the actual test, but we do need to start thinking about it now. And the fact that you're here tells me you are. How you measure that progress can be quite difficult. I mean, if you've got a digital solution that does that for you, that's fantastic. You might also want something that's paper-based, maybe something you can share with times tables, or something the children can take ownership of. This particular sheet that I'm sharing on this slide here is one that has been specifically designed to mirror the weighting that we talked about earlier in those tables. So it specifically is weighted towards 6, 7s, 9s, and 8s and 12s. So although I think there's maybe 15 different sheets, and they are random to a certain extent, the weighting copies the weighting of the actual MTC itself. And then there's a record sheet there. So while competition between children can sometimes be quite difficult for some children, competition with themselves and making sure that they are improving that's a really good way to show them the progress they're making without having to compare them with anybody else. That's a really easy way to record it there. And I put at the end there about recording improvement, and this is one way that you can really celebrate the progress that's being made in times tables. Have a lovely classroom display. Starts out in the autumn term, no leaves, very bare, and as your children are learning their tables, they can add their leaves to the tree. So by the time you get round to the MTC, you've got this lovely lush tree full of times tables knowledge. Just a really lovely visual way, and something to celebrate the maths in your classroom as well.
All right, thank you, Becky. So this is the moment that I'm really excited about. Our new app launched yesterday. So I'm just going to show you a little video which showcases the app and talk you through some of its features. So just bear with me. There we go. So yes, this is the Twinkl Maths app. It is a fluency-based app at the moment. So we've got 2 sections: the Skill Safari, which is the fluency focused area, which has got place value, addition and subtraction, and multiplication and division. And we're just going to show you some place value games here. This is the year 5 syllabus that this is following. So this is year 5 games that are linked to the national curriculum, and they also are linked to the prioritisation framework by the NCTM. We've also got some year 1 games slotted into this as well, but there are games for every year group. So when you onboard the children, so if you're not already aware, we have learner logins that you can set up if you're an ultimate member of Twinkl, and you get 50 learner logins, and you can then set the pupils onto the year group, give them permission to the app, and then they will be on the right curriculum area for them. So yeah, these are some year 1 games. This is the multiplication and division area. And these are some of the games on here as well. So we've they're themed around different biomes. So the place value is jungle biome, the multiplication and division is an ocean biome, and the addition and subtraction is the Arctic tundra, and they've got some lovely characters that go with those games as well. But as you can see, there's quite a varied group of games. This is just a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of them here. And we've got our multiplication facts in there as well, which are a fantastic different way to learn the multiplication facts here. And again, we've got a press button game, which are really popular. And the gamification really runs through the whole of the app. So the children will unlock body parts on their first play of each game. And once they've unlocked all the body parts, they will have their avatar that they can they're all showing their discovery book, and here they are complete. And as you can see there's some accessories in one of the characters. That's because they'll be able to go into the workshop and spend some of the stars that they've earned during the gameplay on some accessories. So here are some of those accessories. There's also like a daily spin, which at the moment is just stars whilst we get those other exciting gamification features out, but these things are coming in the next couple of weeks. So there are also weekly monthly goals, and the goals unlock a wildlife photograph. So it's sort of like caught on wildlife camera. And then we've got the backgrounds that you can also unlock with the jigsaw pieces, which will be in the daily spinner. Just going to pause there a second and just go back to that leaderboard. Because I think the leaderboard's like a really important feature as well of this game, because this is something that you can, if you're a maths lead in your school, or just you know, really enthusiastic about teaching and maths at your school, you can have a leaderboard in your class, and you can have that little bit of competition between pupils in your class. Or you could do this as a whole school thing and have a school display and give out stickers or certificates in assembly for which class is at the top of the leaderboard, which I know was a really great way of motivating pupils in my school when we were doing something similar. Another thing to say about this is that the stars are rewarding gameplay and how often and regularly you're playing. It's not so the children who are, you know, the highest attainers might not necessarily be at the top of the leaderboard. It's those children that are putting in the effort. So actually anybody can be at the top of that leaderboard, and I think that's really lovely. It's you know, it should motivate all learners. So the second area, which is probably more important to what we're talking about today, is the multiplication tables check area. So this is, if you put it in the statutory settings, and you can add custom settings, is exactly the same as the multiplication tables check that you will be administering in year 4. So it has that same weighting, 6 seconds per question, gap between the questions. And we also generate these lovely, and I'm just trying to get back to it. Just pause in a second. And we also got the heat map that shows the child how well they're doing and where they're on the times tables they need to work on. It also then you can give the child custom settings. So this would be what it looks like if you've allowed the child to customize their own settings. You can lock this area off there and just say, I want them to be working on statutory settings, or you can lock it off so that you can say, actually, this child needs to work on their 2s, 5s, or 10s, or, you know, another times table, and just set them that specific times table. So it's really customizable to so you can do what you know is best for that child. And there's at the moment we can set it to black and white, but we are going to bring some other color overlays in the next couple of months too. So we've got some other color overlays coming in, and some other settings that will mimic the statutory check in terms of accessibility settings. This is the reporting area. So in the reporting area, you can see, oh, sorry, this is the settings area. So in the settings area, you can do bulk settings. So you can, you know, here I've set everybody onto year 5 times table, year 5 settings for the skill safari, and then statutory settings for the multiplication tables check. But you can also here, for this child, I've said, actually, this child needs a different learning, had different learning needs. So I've put them on the year 3 curriculum, and I'm just going to get them to concentrate on their 2, 3s, 5s and 10s. So you can customize, so like I say, you can customize it to the needs of the learners in your class. As you can see here, you've got a really great reporting of how the child's doing, and on those objectives covered, they are Like I said, each game hits a national curriculum objective. If you click on that objective, that will bring you into the, I'm just going to pause here, that will bring you into the Twinkl website, and it will bring you to a category of resources that really help to teach that objective. So if you find that actually lots of pupils in my class are struggling on this game type, oh, that objective is this, we need to spend extra time on that. Okay, I'll click on that area and we can all maybe play a game or look at PowerPoint or use a resource here. We've got some great same-day interventions as well. And there might be some concept videos on there as well that can help you. There also might be, you might see that actually it's only a couple of children and that I'm actually going to use that as an intervention piece for those couple of children. As I showed you, the child gets in the MTC area gets a reporting view after they've played the game, but you on the Twinkl website can see how each child is doing with this heat map feature. This shows you the pass rate. So this child is not very good at the 5 times 4. They need to practice that one, but they're getting all these ones all right. And we've segmented this into 2s, 5s, 2s, 10s, 2s and 5s at the top. So that's the times tables that you learn first, then 3s, 4s and 8s, and then the other times tables that they learn in year 4 after that. But if you prefer, you can change that view. So you can change that. This is the classic view, but you can change it into consecutive number view. You can also look at the time. So if you've given them custom settings, they might be passing it, but they might not be passing it in within that 6-second time period. So they might be taking 10 seconds to pass and then therefore wouldn't actually pass the check. So if you are putting custom settings on, I would recommend just checking that time. And also you can change the date filters on there. So from the beginning of year 4 to January, they might not be getting it in the time, but hopefully in the spring term, if you put those dates on, they might be getting closer to passing. So yeah, really customizable. Hopefully you'll find that really easy to use. We've really tried to think about what you need as teachers when we've thought about these reporting views. And this is something you can share with parents as well. You can print this out, so that's great. So yeah, that's a whistle-stop tour of the Maths app. I hope you like the look of it, and you can go and play on it today if you like. Everybody has access to explore it. Oh, thank you. Everybody has access to explore the app, even if you are not a Twinkl member, or if you haven't got an ultimate subscription, you can still explore and have a little look around. To find the app on the website, we are busy sort of putting links in and banners all over the place, but we only launched yesterday, so those things are going up day by day, but you can find that at twinkl.co.uk apps maths. So my next thing on my checklist is considering who and how. Now, when I'm saying considering who and how, I'm thinking about what children in my class might need extra intervention to prepare for the test. What accessibility settings might I need to apply for children, or might they need additional support? And that additional support might not be the SEN settings that they need in the check itself. I worked with a child who was on the autistic spectrum and really struggled just with getting one question incorrect. He was actually really good at his times tables, but he just found that, you know, that growth mindset piece quite difficult. So we gave him some emotional support around that. So yeah, watch out for those things as you go through the year, because there might be different kinds of support that you need to put in. But I'm sure as experienced teachers, you will all know that. And I would work with your Senko on that, of course. And then just thinking about what that looks like in terms of the intervention, but also thinking about how am I going to measure the effectiveness. It's really important that if we're given an intervention, that we're doing it in an effective way and that we're measuring that. So being reflective practitioners. Are there any pupils in my class that the check is not suitable for? Now, this might not be a decision that you want to make straight away. You might want to see how they get on with the times table practice first of all, or you might be aware that you've got a child that might be working on P levels or early on the early years or in Key Stage 1, that they're just not at that knowledge of multiplication where they should be working on their times table practice. And those children will probably need different interventions at the time when you're going to do the practice. So just really thinking about, how am I going to make that practice time purposeful for them? And then also thinking about, what am I going to do during the test with that child? Because it might be that that child is very more than happy that if you speak to their parent and speak to them, that they're more than happy not to go into that test room. And I've worked with children that we've made that decision. I've spoke to the parent, I've spoke to the Senko, and I spoke to the child, and they understand that they're not going to do the test and they're happy about that. But another child that I've worked with very much wasn't aware of her, that she wasn't at that level, and would have been quite upset had she not gone into the test room. So I set her up on you could set her up on the Twinkl Maths app, doing a times table, the MTC, just doing the 2 times table, the 2s and 10s, and then they would still feel like they're part of it. So that's a judgment that you need to make, and you need to discuss with their parent and the child and the Senko. But yeah, really important to be thinking about that sort of early on and having those conversations as you go through the year. In terms of access arrangements, I think it's really good to see it. So I would, these slides are going to come out to you afterwards, and I would really recommend looking at this video, because it just gives you a whistle-stop tour of like the government website and how those accessibility settings can be applied, and how you set it against each child. And just important to recap, I know we said it earlier, but you don't need to get permission to give accessibility settings, but you do need to say who's had them. And then the next thing I would say is that just be really mindful about prepping your equipment and environment. I mean, that might sound a bit obvious, but I've heard of children going into the MTC and not having equipment working, and maybe having that put aside if you are sharing equipment. Another thing I'd say is, if you know that children are going to be doing the assessment on a laptop, say a Chromebook or something that you've got in the school, get them to be practicing on the Chromebook beforehand. It's great that paper resources are great, and we've got wonderful ones of them. And obviously I'm digital, so that, I've got a bias here, but I would say it is actually important that children do practice on a computer as well, because sometimes we see that children that really know their times tables don't have that keyboard skills and can't input quickly enough. So just having that practice time on the same equipment that they're going to use in the check's important. So if you've been practicing on iPads all year round in class, use your iPads in the check, because the computer keyboard might throw them. Check that your headphones are working. If you are giving anybody audio, make sure they've got headphones, or make sure they're in a separate room. And so noise cancelling headphones can be really calming for some children. It just can make them feel like more concentrated and in like their own cocoon and happy. The other thing is, you need to make sure that you cover any display up. If it's found that you have not covered a display, you can be actually reported at your test can be voided, because you've not had a suitable environment for them. I just put a little jokey picture on here, but yeah, inform other staff. Don't let Mr. Rogers be doing an African drumming session outside your window. That's not what you want in your test settings. Don't let that, you don't want that rowdy cohort in the hall if your classroom opens onto the hall. Just make sure that people are giving you that same respect that we give for year 6 pupils, so that your children can concentrate fully when they're in the check. And then, yeah, the other thing that's really important to note is that you will need to generate pins. Now, you generate pins when you get into the government gateway. When your SLT should have access to this, so you will need to speak to them about it. It might be that your maths lead will be doing this on behalf of SLT. It might be your assistant head, deputy head. It might be the head themselves. It depends on your setting. But they might want you to set up a sign-in, but you just make sure you're doing this really ahead of time. So like we said, last year, you had access to this gateway from April. To do the try it out check, you will need to generate a new PIN each day. For the children, and also in the test period you will need to generate a new PIN each day. So yeah, don't just think I've generated the PINs, oh, I'm really organized, I'm ahead of time, great. You will actually need to do it on the day, so fingers crossed those photocopies hold up out for you. And then yeah, just being reflective after you've done the practice test. Why are those settings correct for the pupils that I gave them to? Do I need to think about the equipment, or like where I'm seating people? Just being reflective. And then the last thing, Becky's going to wrap up for us.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, just to finish off really, and I suppose this is relevant to any testing, but as a year 6 teacher for many years, I know how difficult it is. It's difficult to find that balance between this is a really important test and you really need to show what you could do in this test, and the reason it matters, to actually this is only a test and we're doing it, but we're actually doing the learning for this reason. So it's hard, but I do feel that lots of things that Sally touched on then are really important to making sure that the test isn't like this new special thing. If they're going and doing a practice weekly, twice a week, whatever you decide, then it's not going to be so odd for them to go off into the ICT suite or get the tablets or however you're going to do it for the actual test. And I think trying to have as much practice as possible in those conditions is a really good way to normalise the test a little bit more. Also encouraging that positive growth mindset. It can be easy. If you love maths, it can be easy to encourage that and encourage children that, maths is great and it's important that we know our times tables, and really selling the reasons why we need to. If you're somebody who's less confident in maths, that can be hard, and it can be quite difficult if you've got also, we often hear at parents' evening, parents saying, well, I don't know my tables, I find maths really hard. So I think as much as you can encourage that growth mindset, positive ethos around maths, generally that's going to help. The test is an opportunity for children to show off what they can do, and we know it's important they know their tables. So I think also, at year 4, you can share that with the children. It's important this, because this is what you're going to be able to do later if you free up that space in your brain. So talk about it, talk about why it's there and what it's for, and all the positive things. And there's just a few examples of things you might do. We have got a wealth of calculator colouring on the Twinkl website, and some specifically for times tables, but that's a good way to practice. That's maybe not so stressful. Colouring is quite calming, isn't it? And then we've got some breathing exercises, and our PSHE team put together some good videos as well for leading some meditations. There's plenty out there. Just trying to keeping calm in the test, but also trying to normalise and keep it as calm as possible in the run up to the test is really important too. And I think, Sally, that brings us to the end.
It does. Thank you for joining us.